This episode is brought to you in partnership with Econet Wireless Zimbabwe. Hello there, Tando Book Club lovers. This season, we're going on a deep dive with some of Africa's female thought leaders. Joining me today as our guest for a 3-episode special is Thembe Khumalo. Thembe Khumalo is a Zimbabwean-born storyteller. She was first published as a columnist in Newsday, which at the time was the country's largest independent newspaper, and her column was Local Drama. She went on to write Southern Sister, another weekly column for the Southern Eye. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she released a collection of meditations as an ebook called Words for Work. She is currently working on her first novel, and Words and Other Weapons is her first compilation in print. A brand strategist and personal branding coach, Thembe has over the years produced large volumes of content on the subjects of corporate communication, personal branding, and brand strategy, including hosting a Pan-African podcast called Brand to Build on behalf of her consulting firm, Brand Builder Africa. Born in Muchabezi Mission in rural Matabeleland, Thembe is a mother of 2 almost adult daughters. She attended the Dominican convent in Bulawayo and now lives in Harare with her husband. She holds a BA in Media Studies and an MBA from Africa Leadership University. If you'd like to find out more from her, you can follow her using on social media at her handle at Thembe Khumalo, or look her up on her website www.thembekhumalo.com. As is our custom, we always begin every episode with a quote from a famous African that we believe captures the spirit and message of our book discussion. Naturally, we've chosen a quote from Thembe's book. "When I look, I see her, a me I might have been if I were more brave, more beautiful, more clever, just more. But if I am honest with myself, I see a me I could never hope to be, not in 100 million billion years." And this is from her piece called Herself. Welcome, Thembe.
Thank you, Selena.
It's a pleasure to have you on the book club.
I'm excited to be here.
So in today's episode, we're going to be discussing motherhood, but I'd like to take our viewers through some of the background to the book itself. So you've been a writer, as we've heard, for a long time.
Since birth, it feels like.
So columns, blogs, social media content, and so much more. How come it took so long to publish this book?
I was busy making a living. I think that would be the answer to that, because I think depending on what you write, you need to create space around the writing so that your thoughts can flow. You can create a little bit of mind space for what you're doing. And that requires resources in time and energy. And while you're doing that, you've got to figure out how the bills are getting paid and the food is on the table. So I think I was very busy making a living, but also writing, all the things that you mentioned evolved and became the book.
So the book has a very unique title, which many reviewers are still trying to sort of figure out. Words and Other Weapons. Why did you choose this particular title?
Honestly, I feel like the title chose me. As a wordsmith, working with words and also processing life through words, I'm very conscious of the power of words. And I think that we often weaponize them. But I also think of words as the weapons that we use to push back against negative things in our lives. Words as encouragement, which is a weapon against discouragement. Words as exhortation, and so on. So words are weapons in different ways, and I think they are the readily accessible, available weapons that we use every day.
It's a very thought-provoking title, especially when you go through the 22 stories and essays, because you do see in the many, many ways in which words can be weaponized, both for or against a particular struggle. The book jacket describes the category of this piece as an abstract literary art, both a collection of essays, nonfiction, and short stories, fiction as well. The styles of writing are varied. So we've got chicklet in pieces like Hen Party, and then Stream of Consciousness and other pieces. This was a very brave choice. And wasn't this maybe possibly too brave a choice for a debut in book publishing? Why was it so important for you to have this formless category and to have such varied writing?
It really wasn't, but it's who I am. It's what it is. So I laugh a little bit when you say, wasn't this too brave a choice? I want to believe I'm nothing if not brave, particularly with myself. I want to be brave with my life. I want to be brave with my work. And so I didn't really choose the category. I wrote the stories, I put them together, and nobody knew how to categorize them. So
Then you said it shall be a book.
then, this is where we landed.
I love that I'm nothing if not brave. So the book also offers us, I feel like you serve us up a very rich feast of characters in this book. I wanted to know, do you like them all? Do you love them all? Are there some that are your favorite, some that are your least favorite? And I think you can tell us because we're at the book club.
It's a bit like asking who's your favorite child. I like different things about different ones. So no, I wouldn't say I have a favorite. The funny thing is when you're writing, there's some things that you write and you feel like this is good. And other things you write and you're like, should I even put this out into the world? But once you have put it into the world, that thing that you thought was maybe a little bit of a waste of time, somebody gets such a revelation out of it. And then you're like, okay, clearly I wasn't the audience for it, but someone was. And I think that's a lesson that I learned quite early on when I was writing for Newsday. That pressure to produce 900 words every week meant that sometimes I did produce work that I thought, maybe not. But what was always often surprising was that even with those pieces, someone would write back and say, wow, like this touched me, this moved me, this made me think. So no favorite characters. And I think that all the characters have value to someone, somewhere.
And we shall be anxiously awaiting to hear which of those characters are doing their work. Because there is not a wasted story and there's not a wasted character in the book, which is quite difficult to do in a world where we're just producing more information and content than we can consume.
Well, thank you.
Well done to you.
Thank you.
The last piece in the book, Words Don't Teach, presents a challenge which I think is also echoed in the way that the book is described on the back cover jacket, which is to the introspective reader. And in fact, the last line of that piece is so impactful that I actually had took a moment to then re-reflect on the entire book. And it was almost like it was now reading the book sort of like backwards going to the front. And I kind of wondered, did you do that on purpose? Was it like a sneaky little trick to be like, now after taking you through all of these stories and or some moments where you're like, clutch your pearls, you make us rethink it. And do you really believe that every reader has the power to enter into that invitation of revelation that you so confidently charge us with at the end of the book?
So I think you credit me with a lot more cleverness than I possess, because no, it wasn't a strategy to make you read the book backwards. But certainly I did want to end in a way that would kind of tidy everything up with the title, with the subject of words specifically. I've never thought about whether there are people in the world who don't have capacity to reflect. I have always assumed that we all do. And I would like to continue in that general vein. Yeah. Because I think if you're not reflecting, the world is a very different place. And I'm not sure how one navigates that kind of world. Because I have always been a reflector and surrounded by people who reflect. So in my mind, it's what you do as a human being. Yeah.
So the book launched in major online stores and distribution centers in the latter half of 2023. And already there have been a few reviews trickling in online and people buying the book. Has there been any kind of insight or reflection from readers that sort of took you aback and made you feel like, oh, I didn't know that you were going to go there with this piece of work I've taken and put out into the world?
Well, a very good example is yourself. And yes, and I think that's part of the pleasure and the panic of putting your work out in the world, is that you just don't know how it will taste to the person that actually eats the dish that you have served, and what they might liken it to in their desire to create understanding out of it. So yes, there have been a few surprises, and pleasantly so, I think, because it's like, oh, that's what you read out of that. And I think the I don't want to call it a challenge, perhaps the difficulty of self-revelation is that you will put yourself and your thoughts and your ideas into the world, and it is the world that will decide what they mean, regardless of what you intended. And that takes courage, and that's why I think more people don't, because the risk, that's the word. It is the risk of self-revelation that people will interpret as they will. And I think you have to be comfortable with that fact.
It's interesting, though, because you've had such a long and renowned career. And I would say in self-revelation, because you started out in nonfiction, right? So truth telling all the time, by noon Friday, like whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. Did you feel any kind of a difference in terms of, now it's a book, I'm a little bit more nervous, or was it just more of the same?
I felt very, very anxious. I wrote in a lot more detail about my children, whom I, love dearly, and I worried about them and how they may perceive the things that I've said, however well-meaning. And I think someone once said, which is a terrible thing for a writer to. Someone once said that fiction is what we use to hide behind the truth. Fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth. And I think that is true because in a lot of the fiction, I also had other things that I wanted to say that I couldn't just say. And packaging them as fiction made them easier for me to say, and I hope also more palatable for the reader to receive.
Well, definitely a lot of the fiction stories were quite frank, and really told some truths that hit one between the eyes, but not in a ram your head over.
Glad to hear it.
So that's always pleasant.
Yeah.
A common response from reviewers in terms of reviews online is that the book felt like a warm conversation with a good friend. Was there someone you were trying to befriend in the book? Or was that also another one of these where you were like, oh, well, that's a pleasant surprise?
You know, a lot of my writing starts off as journal entries. So whether it is a newspaper column, a blog post, or the stories in this book, usually it starts with me writing for my own clarity, seeking clarity, and writing as a person who has a practice of writing. So whether I'm publishing or not, I'm always writing. So I suppose for it to come out that way is because it is actually the warm conversation that I am having with myself as I'm trying to make sense of my world and the things that are happening in it, and seeking that clarity in my own thinking and therefore in my own expression.
The book is a compilation of pieces speaking to the woman, about the woman, and through women themselves, which I thought was quite clever, whether you had done that by design or not. And one of the prisms that's a theme throughout the book, from dedication through to fiction stories and nonfiction, is motherhood. So in the motherhood pieces that are fiction, it feels like you are presenting motherhood on display. So we're all observing it together. Then in the nonfiction stories, you are speaking as a daughter, but more so as a mother. And in particular, Blooming Flower, Herself, World Without You, and Let Us Pray, you are really getting stuck in with like the true heart of a mother, like that feeling. They say that when you have children, it's like your heart is walking around outside of you. And definitely there was the actual strong sense of that across all the pieces. And you alluded to this earlier, you wrote much more in detail about your children this time than previously. How did you navigate the personal and private? Because it's your children, it's your mother, and then it's also you revealing yourself as a mother.
With great difficulty, Selena. That's how I navigated it. And I'm not even sure, even now, if I navigated it successfully. I've always thought that when you're telling your story, part of the really fine, high skill is to be able to tell your story without inadvertently telling someone else's story without their permission. And that's very, very difficult to do. And I have tried to do that. But I think being well-meaning has been a big part of that. And just hoping that the relationships that exist in real life outside the book are big enough and strong enough and good enough that if there is offense taken that wasn't intended, we can resolve it. Yeah.
The nonfiction pieces have been described as a love letter to your children. So I think those of us who are not in the relationship, are feeling in a very positive way about those
That's
self-revelations. And, it occurred to me because one of the pieces that's quite early on in the book is Let Us Pray. Are your love letters to your children almost like an answer to that prayer, or you saying your own prayers for those children? Because in Blooming Flower, you describe this process of falling in love again and again and again through the development of this child. Even though I don't have children, it resonated. I felt like, but this must be, sometimes I catch my mother looking at me and I'm like, she must be in a moment where she is like, oh,
Yeah.
I am so in love with this kid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, drink it in. Yeah, do that. And then in herself, we get that same in love, but here you bring this wonder and this awe to this person you're describing. And it's almost like, how could this person have even come from me? I didn't even realize. And in a way, you're almost speaking to how children belong to themselves. And, you're always in the space where you're like, oh, that's me. And then this other space where you're like, whoa, I don't know where you got that from. So in that way, are these prayers or love letters, or it's just, this is how the thing came to you?
Again, it is as deep as you are making it out, but also as simple as just observing your child and going, where did you come from? And I think when my first child was about 4, I sat and I was watching her, and I didn't realize I'd said it out loud. And I said, where did you come from? And she went, over there, as 4-year-olds will do,
Yeah, literal. Mm-hmm.
But it's so, watching a child grow up is a process of continuous wonder, and also learning that you have so little to do with who they become. As a parent, I think we really greatly magnify our our capacity to influence, and that is something that I'm very conscious of. That my child is the main character in the story of her life, and I am part of the supporting cast. And in some scenes, I'm on stage with her, and in others, I'm backstage. And in some scenes, I have a speaking part, and in others, I don't get to speak. And I find that when I think of it like that, it helps me be at peace with the things that are outside my control, and also to just allow a person to be a person and to be who they are as a person without feeling undue, feeling that you have to exert undue influence on that process.
Well, you've definitely left them a wonderful love letter that will outlive your own life. And I was a little bit envious of them. I was like, oh, I can see myself as a daughter returning to those pieces time and time again, as you change and evolve, and hearing something, new in the love that my mother has for me. So I think on behalf of your children, thank you for doing that for them.
You're welcome. But the stories are, as I say in the dedication, for all of the daughters of African women.
Yeah, it's just our mothers didn't write a book and publish it. So another mother, who's got low volume in this book, is the mother-in-law. And only really in the shadows of the fiction pieces, never in the non-fiction pieces. We see the mother-in-law, I think, quite strongly in the shadows in something like Mother and Father, and Hen Party. In as the narrator is describing different dynamics. Is there any reason you kept this particular mother figure's volume low in your exploration of motherhood in this book?
I think it's just because it's not a position that I'm seized with. Whereas being a mother, and particularly a mother of daughters, is something I am seized with. Like, it is in my consciousness every single day. It's it's in my face. It's front and center. Being a daughter, my mother's daughter, is also something that is front and center for me every single day. Whereas, and I think that cycle of daughtering and then mothering makes that cycle kind of complete, and also completely
Consuming.
yeah. Thank you.
And encompassing.
Indeed. But I've never been a mother-in-law, and it's not something that I'm seized with.
And I mean, good writers will write what they know.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Motherhood piece that struck me very deeply is Asante Unborn. Intriguing because there's actually no physical child, but the display of motherhood is throughout the story. And this protagonist is unnamed, but all the other characters are named. And she is a mother because she carries the absence of this unborn child with her, and makes meaning about every stage of her life, and all of these things. What inspired this particular exploration of motherhood for you? Because in a sense, it's not something that you're particularly seized with, as you've just described.
When I was writing that piece, I had such a sense of urgency and a sense of how important it was that I do it correctly, that I present this correctly. Because in my life, I have so many beloved women that are walking that actual journey. So many. And our understanding of women's life stories and journeys and choices kind of collapses into that story. And it was really, really important to me to tell that story, and to tell it well, in such a way that it would give a reader insight into what is happening in the lives of my friends. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think one of the perspectives I came away from after reading that is that the assignation mother, actually, I think for all women, has a lot more to do with our ability to be productive. And then a lot of it is expectations that others put on us, we put on ourselves. But the actual journey of motherhood, when you have to mother a child, is nothing like that. So it's almost like whether we have the child or not, whether we choose to or not, it's always around us. It's always an aspect of our identity. It's something we have to reckon with, explain to ourselves and explain to other people. So I found that very, very interesting, because particularly at the end of the story kind of reaches this climax where you are like, yeah, but she is a mom. Like, she is a mother. Like, it's got nothing to do with the Sanjay. It's got everything to do with how she's built her life. She's a mother. So would you, I've heard some people say that whether or not you have a child, every woman is a mother. Are you leaning towards that inclination, or not at all?
Gosh, Selena, I've never actually thought about it. And I don't want to exclude the women that haven't had children. But at the same time, I also don't want to make the process of having had children, because there's some people that feel that it's so special that it can't just be accessible without having fought the war. So I honestly don't know. And perhaps it's something that every woman has to work out for herself with fear and trembling.
Definitely, because the pressure is real out there.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to do with that story was to remind people that it's not always that somebody sits down and says, I'm not going to have children. It is something that can happen while you're doing other things. You're it's almost like I forgot to have a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was busy and I was getting my degree and I was ticking all the other boxes that you said were important to tick. You world, And now here I am having ticked those boxes, and now you're saying, oh, but you didn't tick this really super important box. And there's only so much I can do as a human being at a time. And some balls are going to get dropped and some things are going to get missed out. And it wasn't my intention, but this is where we are.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely concur with that. You're busy, you're caught up. And one day it's like, oh, okay. There was that thing,
Yeah.
that handbag I forgot at number 46 Pendines Road. I need to go get that. Yeah. Just as we're starting to wind down the episode, you alluded to this earlier in terms of the things you're seized with, being the daughter and being the mother. In the book, we have many pictures of you as a daughter at pivotal moments in your life. Did you find the journey of motherhood gave you more empathy for your own mother as a daughter, and sort of helped this current stage of your evolution, as because you never stop being a daughter even if you have children of your own? Did you find you had more empathy? Did you find you had more understanding? Did you find that there were some conversations or questions where you just no longer needed closure because now you were in it as the mother?
100%, 100%. I mean, as adolescent girls, we are brutal with our mothers. Brutal. Most of us, myself included. And so we come with so much judgment at them. We come with so much do better. And our, rolling eyes and goosenecking and finger snapping and
Slam doors.
And when you get to the other side, long before your child reaches adolescence, you realize that this individual is actually their own individual. And God help me if I'm trying to turn them into something else. And that, I think, is a moment that gives you pause and definitely shifts the way you see your mother and your appreciation of all her efforts and the well-meaning, the good intentions behind them.
Yeah, I find with my own mother, having done a parenting stint last year, sort of coming back into that relationship, or that, that you lock in with your mother. There's always a gaze, I think. She's looking at you, you're looking at her. And I kind of had a moment where in this whole empathy, understanding, don't need to go for therapy for that anymore, where she kind of was like, yeah. And then That's life. Like, circle of life, baby girl. Like, this is how it is.
Yeah,
Like, I knew you would get here, and like,
eventually.
I'm past it. Like, and I find that so magical about mothers, and really, I think the exploration and exposition of motherhood in the book is actually one of the gems. It's one of the things I really, really enjoyed. But we are winding down to the end of the this first episode of Words and Other Weapons, and we always end every episode with a reading from the author herself. We like to give the author the last word. So Thembe is going to read a story about motherhood from her book.
Yeah, I'm going to read from, well, I think I'll read the whole piece,
Yes.
World Without You, which is a piece that I wrote over a number of years, actually, as I was reflecting on this journey. I thought I minded it all, minded the mess and the noise and the constantly being needed. I thought I minded being always on for everyone but me. 100 years ago, when I was married to your father and people would ask me why we had no kids, I would say that children were noisy and dirty and very expensive. And I was right, you are. I thought I would mind all of that. But then one day, not suddenly, but sort of abruptly, I wanted nothing more than to be a mum, your mum. I wanted to be loved with that passion that makes two little girls scramble at the front door when I come in from work to see who will hug me first. And so after 4 years of marriage, there was daughter one, whom I had always thought would be or should be a boy. But once I had tasted the sweet delights of daughterness, once I was immersed in the downy comforts of daughtering, I knew we wouldn't need a boy. And so there was daughter two, and cuddles, and dollies, and ribbons, and rubber toys in the bath, and nursery food, and baby talk, and puzzles, and black girl hair things, and all of it was lovely. All of it was a lot. And I thought with time I would mind. I thought I wanted a pristine car without the scars of early morning rushed reversing or the debris of your hockey matches and ballet lessons. An organized grown-up person's car without your abandoned lunchboxes containing half-eaten sandwiches that you tried to squeeze in between activities and crumpled chocolate wrappers that you somehow always found time to savor. A car in which the radio was always tuned to classic FM, or the CD in the player was not Now 69 or Junior Praise and Worship hits or Barney and Friends, but maybe a Vita? I thought I wanted quiet evenings with meals that involved seafood and lettuce and dry bubbly drinks and adult company. I thought I could use a touch more gastronomic complexity in place of the robust quantities of potato wedges and meatballs and custard that you prefer. I thought coming home to long jazz-accompanied bubble baths and white-on-white decor would be a relief from fighting over who can shower next and those hairbrushes that repeatedly make their way from my bathroom to yours and somehow never make it back. I thought a tidy life would suit my sense of order and give me, finally, room to breathe easy, room for luxury and self-indulgence. I thought I'd like some space to be sexy and sophisticated, like I knew I could be, but have never quite mastered. But now, I know better. Now that a life without the chaos and the litter that you bring is actually within reach, I know that I prefer this life where I'm yelling lights on everywhere as I walk through the house, switching them off behind you. This life with its bedroom floors littered like landmines, with the carnage of bags and books and sports equipment positioned to trip me as I make my way to you, sleeping uncovered on a chilly night, to you, whimpering with a sore throat or a cold, to you, disappointed over the results of a test or performance, or you elated about selection to the vocal ensemble or the pottery club or first team sport, to you, the center of my world. What will my world be without its center? Its crumpled, crazy, cuddlesome center, without its chaos and confusion and complexity, without its connection and completion. My world without you is not my world.
Thank you, Thembe. Well, it's been another great edition of the book club as we've been talking to Thembe Khumalo. See you again next week, same time, as we celebrate another fabulous African female author. Until then, stay safe, stay strong, and stay true. Goodbye. This episode was brought to you in partnership with Econet Wireless Zimbabwe.